No, no. Okay,
No,
so if
no,
you were God,
yeah.
would you construct this contrived situation where you know somebody would do something, but you just construct the situation anyway?
I can't
Like
speak
if God is
on
all like if
mental
God is
health.
all wise, like dude, if God is all wise, he'd know what would happen, correct?
Well, yeah, obviously.
Okay, so then why the fuck would he do it in the first place?
Again, with being all
Right, there's
wise,
no reason to, because if you know every single outcome that's ever going to happen, why the fuck would you do it? So you're telling me an all-powerful, benevolent God who's all-wise would deliberately create a world where suffering exists, even though he knew that outcome would happen.
well, yes, because he has his wisdom that would triumph over
Well,
whatever
if he
we
has
think of
wisdom,
God.
okay, well, if he has wisdom, then he'd know that if he did these actions, that suffering would exist. So you're saying he deliberately created suffering?
Yeah,
Yet being a benevolent being?
yeah.
How is that not a contradiction? So you're telling me an all good being deliberately created suffering in the world?
Hello, mate. Can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you.
Okay. I'm sure you're tired of hearing it. But I was going to talk about the problem of evil and
Okay.
your belief on it. Um, I find it kind of the problem in itself a bit erroneous in a way, in terms of how the problem is constructed, in terms of to try and debunk God, in the sense that it only strips God to two attributes. It strips it down
It
to his.
doesn't. Yeah, it doesn't.
How?
So
Okay.
yeah, so there's only two attributes that matter here. We can say God is all knowing, God's everywhere. Like that doesn't matter. The attributes that matter is whether he's all powerful and benevolent. So we can okay. So we could attribute all attributes at the same time. God is all powerful, all knowing, all like omnipresent. He's everywhere, and he's also benevolent. So it would still like the syllogism would still make sense. We're not stripping him down to only two attributes. We're just focusing on the attributes that cause a contradiction.
But if there's another attribute that exists within God that stops that contradiction, does that not matter then?
Okay, so how does any other attribute stop like prevent that contradiction of an all-powerful, benevolent God but evil existing?
Oh, okay. The attribute that God is all wise, the most wise.
Oh, really? So God was wise enough to create animals that are carnivorous, where the only means they have to survive is by torturing and killing other animals, and they don't even have the moral agency to consider the moral consequences of their actions. You're saying that was the choice of an all wise God who's all knowing, but yet is benevolent and all powerful. How the
I
fuck
think
does that make any sense?
I just think it's illogical to try and criticize or uh try and I guess refuse what God has like allowed to happen because we don't share the same knowledge of it. And that's why I say if you're all wise, you have the most wisdom. If you both don't share the same information, you're not really in a position to. I'm not
Yeah,
saying
okay, so
question it.
yeah,
You're
dude.
not.
Okay, so dude, you're not. Okay, so dude, all you're saying is believe what I believe. Don't question it, even if it makes
No,
no
no, no. I'm
sense.
not. I'm
Just
not
don't
saying don't
question it.
question
Yeah,
it.
that's literally what you're saying. So, dude, please explain to me how a god could be all powerful, benevolent, all good, incapable of committing any kind of evil, but he created species that have to torture and kill each other and don't even have the moral agency to consider the moral consequences of their actions. And you're claiming this is also an all knowing, all wise God. You're telling me he's both wise, benevolent, all powerful, but does that. That's a complete contradiction.
No, it's not. It's not a contradiction. I would say it's up
How
for
is that not a
questioning.
contradiction?
It's up for questioning
How
because. Oh, go on. Oh, I'd say it's not a contradiction because it's not to be all wise. It requires you to make choices that might not make sense to someone, but that's the point of wisdom. If God knows stuff that we don't know and and allows things to happen because we lack that knowledge, like I'm sure there are times where things have happened that you didn't want, but you didn't know something,
this
but
is
someone else
question
had.
begging. Yeah, so this is question banking. You're making a premise that assumes the conclusion's true. So that's not an argument. You're basically saying, well, we know God is all wise because he's all wise. And I just pointed to a very obvious situation where he's clearly not wise.
How do you
If
know
God
that?
was wise and benevolent and all powerful, he wouldn't create carnivorous animals that have to torture and kill each other to survive and don't even have the moral agency to consider like the moral consequences of their actions. So basically, you're saying, oh, well, no, we know God is all wise because he's all wise.
Well, God, you're taking these attributes that God says He is, and you're saying, okay, we'll grant that He's this and this, therefore it leads to a contradiction. And I'm saying that yes, if you're going to allow those attributes because they're a part of God, you need to allow the other attributes of God. One of them is wisdom, and if you're going to say, oh well, you're saying that He's wise, but we don't know if He's wise, but you're willing to accept that the two other attributes are attributes. So are you not going to accept this attribute as well because
I'm
it's
not
linked to one?
accepting that God is all powerful or benevolent. I'm saying there's a contradiction. So I'm not accepting anything. I'm saying there's a clear contradiction when God is all powerful and benevolent. Clearly, he can't be. When we have examples like this. So I'm not accepting that he has any attributes. So that's just a complete fucking straw man of my position.
No, okay. So if you don't believe that, but for the basis of this argument, the problem of evil, you'll accept those two attributes. But so you don't believe that the attribute that I
You
mentioned.
literally just repeated the nonsense that I already corrected you on. I am not accepting God has any attributes. I'm saying if we're going to apply certain attributes and there's the existence of suffering and or evil, then God clearly cannot have those two attributes simultaneously.
But the third attribute, I don't get how the third attribute doesn't correct that. How does that defeat? How does that debunk it? How does the how does
Well, you're not actually providing you're not actually providing any proof that he's all wise.
No, I'm saying
Basically,
that,
you're saying no. Basically, you're saying if he were all wise and he knew something that we don't, then that would correct that problem. Well, okay, like there's just no possible way for God to be benevolent and all powerful, but then create a situation where there is just horrible suffering and death for absolutely no practical purpose. And then you're saying, oh well, wisdom like takes that away. Well, if God was wise, he wouldn't fucking do that.
Well, you don't know that because you same information as God. You're just saying that I feel this way. Obviously, no disrespect. I'm just saying that you would think this way because obviously you have your knowledge, and you'll say, oh well, this doesn't make sense. But I'm like, if you don't share the same knowledge as God, it's a bit obviously you can criticize it, but it doesn't really hold that much weight if you don't share the same knowledge to say, well, clearly he's not wise. It's like questioning someone who claims to be all wise when you don't share the same knowledge is kind of illogical, I think.
Okay, so please explain to me how it's an act of wisdom for an all-powerful benevolent being to create unnecessary fucking suffering.
That's the thing. You're using this word unnecessary, but again, you can't prove that it's unnecessary because again, you don't have that wisdom.
Okay, wait. Are you Christian? Are you Christian?
Oh, I follow the Muslim faith.
What?
I'm a Muslim.
Oh, you're Muslim. Okay, so you're telling me there's some sort of purpose for God to ensure that animals are in a position where they have to torture and kill each other and they have no moral agency. And apparently that's necessary.
I would say, if I believe that God is all wise, I'm not in a position to. I'm not saying that obviously you can't, think critically of what God does. I'm just saying that I'm not in a position to question what He does because I don't share the same knowledge as Him. But I get that it does seem very unusual. But I don't see like if you don't share the same knowledge, it's a bit illogical to try and question why someone would do something. Because if you had the same knowledge and then you were like, well, clearly what you're doing is wrong, you have grounds to say that it's wrong because I know the same thing you know, and I have my opinion on it, therefore it's wrong,
Okay, so mind telling me why God doesn't actually mention anywhere in the Quran, Hadiths, or any other scriptures where God would supposedly dip his hand into why animals are in a position where they have to torture and kill each other?
I'm sorry, say that again?
Why wouldn't God have written like in some holy scripture like the Quran, Hadiths, or any other holy scripture, why wouldn't he have explained why animals that have no moral agency, where they can even, consider the consequences of their actions, are forced in a situation where they have to torture and kill each other?
Because within the attributes of God, it explains that. If you have attributes, you have to apply them to all contexts.
Okay. So you're saying any stupid, retarded thing that we see that it is clearly a direct contradiction, we can just explain it away as God being wise, even though it's like not a clear case of wisdom. We just have to assume that premise.
Could you give an example, sorry? Because I don't know if there was something to be a contradiction.
I don't know, animals torturing and killing each other, where there's no clear, obvious reason for that to exist.
No, but again,
so we're just supposed to assume, right? We're just supposed to assume this is an act of wisdom, right? Just assume.
Yeah, because I have no grounds to say it's not.
How do you not have any grounds to say it's not?
I don't have grounds to say it's wrong because it's not something that I share the same knowledge with.
And dude, I think you're trying to weasel out of this. So what a lot of theists try to do is they try to use things like, oh, well, God is all wise. He's constructing things in a way where he's committing like ultimate good. Mm-hmm. If God was truly benevolent, like this is like besides any other attributes he has, like wisdom. Okay. If God was truly benevolent, he wouldn't allow for suffering to exist regardless of what other attribute there is, like wisdom. If God was benevolent and all-powerful, he would have the fucking wisdom to ensure that no suffering exists in the first place. Like that's just complete nonsense. So basically you're saying that God is not benevolent. So that's a concession on one of the Epicurean propositions.
No, I don't think it is, because like evil, like for evil to, well, subjectively for evil.
I'm not even talking about evil right now necessarily. I'm talking about suffering. But okay, I guess technically I could say God is the one committing this evil, since he's the one who's put animals in the situation where they have to be tortured and killed.
Okay, fair enough. It doesn't really add up to me, that the idea that you have to concede that God's benevolence, because for an act of love to be all loving, it doesn't necessarily mean that evil or type of evil doesn't have to exist. It doesn't necessarily mean that.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, yes, it does. Okay, so in order for a being to be all good, and assuming the being is all powerful, that would mean the being would ensure that nothing but good could exist. This idea that, oh, well, God has to allow for some suffering to exist, well, then he's either not benevolent or not all powerful. You can choose which one. But this idea that an all-powerful benevolent being, regardless of any other attributes you apply to him, like wisdom, well, an all-powerful benevolent being, since he has the power to stop evil, and since he's all good, would not allow anything but good to exist. It doesn't matter if he has properties like wisdom, like especially if he has the property of wisdom, then he'd be even more capable of preventing evil from existing. Like you're trying to water down the definition of benevolence. You're basically saying, oh, well, it's benevolent to cause suffering. Well, no, a being of perfect good, all powerful and all wise would not allow any suffering to exist. He would not allow anything lower than absolute perfection of good. So what you're trying to do, like, is just you play this word game where you're trying to say, oh, well, God doesn't have to be benevolent all the time, which is just nonsense. So it's a concession that God is not benevolent. God is not all good if he's going to allow some evil or some suffering.
No, I disagree personally, because I disagree in the sense that if you're going to say that, oh, but wisdom doesn't stop the contradiction that he's supposed to be all loving, all powerful, but then evil exists, is that if the greatest form of love includes the suffering, then does that, through wisdom, does that not allow for it to still exist? Okay,
so the greatest form of love is an 8-year-old girl getting raped so severely that she dies. Greatest form of love is literally billions and billions of animals existing in the wild who have no moral agency, who are forced to torture and kill each other.
Okay, sure. But the thing is, again, with the wisdom, you don't have the same knowledge. You don't know what's going to happen. You
have not provided any fucking proof of wisdom, so I don't understand why we would accept. Okay, for one thing, you have not provided any proof of wisdom. You're simply assuming that, and we've already gone over how the property of wisdom would have nothing to do with benevolence and being all powerful. Does not affect this at all, because again, a benevolent, all-powerful being would not accept any evil or suffering to exist at all, because a benevolent being who has the power to do so would not allow anything but absolute perfect good to exist. And especially if you're going to apply the property of wisdom, then he'd be even more capable of ensuring this. So if anything, this actually goes like against your own claim, even like you're actually creating an argument against your own claim, because God would have the be even more capable of ensuring that nothing but absolute good exists.
No, because wisdom in itself doesn't mean that you have to avoid all forms of evil. Wisdom doesn't necessitate that. And also
benevolence does.
Yeah, but you just mentioned that
you're going back and forth between God is not benevolent and God is not all powerful.
No,
that's what you're doing right now.
I never said this.
You literally are doing that right now and not even realizing it.
No, I was saying that because earlier on you made the assumption that you haven't provided any proof that God is all wise, but even under the assumption that God is all wise, which I agree to, I said that I'm assuming this because I'm not I haven't looked into into Islam in terms of but I know that's one of his names, or one of God's names is the most wise. I was saying that under that assumption, evil could exist. God could be all loving or all powerful, because some forms of wisdom doesn't mean that evil is completely avoided. It doesn't mean that, So I was saying that.
Now you're fucking conceding that God's not all powerful. You keep flip-flopping. I've already explained this. So you're changing the definition of benevolence to mean, oh, well, he'll allow for some suffering. And then when I point out how, no, a benevolent being who has the power to stop evil would ensure that there is no evil exists. He would ensure that nothing but absolute good exists. And then when I point that out, then you apply this wisdom principle. Oh, well, he's wise enough to know that a certain amount of suffering is good, but that only strengthens my argument. If he was wise, all-powerful, and benevolent, then he'd even be more capable of ensuring nothing but absolute good exists.
I mean, I understand your point. The reason why I still don't agree with it is because when I say that when someone's all loving and then all powerful and then all wise, I'm not saying that because one applies that reduces how much the other one is applied. I'm saying they work in tangent with each other. That if the greatest form of love and the greatest form of wisdom and the greatest form of power, they all intertwine with each other. It doesn't mean that there's a reason why one thing happens, or we can apply that to this kind of ability of God. We apply it to this one ability of God, and we apply it to this one ability of God. It doesn't mean that one is discarded, one doesn't exist anymore. They just they work in tangent with each other. So if something requires wisdom, and it requires it's all loving, and it requires it's all power, I don't see how that would create a contradiction if God allows some suffering to exist. Suffering, not evil, even though they're kind of the same thing in a way. For suffering to exist, if it's an act of wisdom, it's an act of love, and it's an act of all power. I don't see where the contradiction is.
You're question begging again.
How? I'm saying
that. So you're claiming that the greatest act of love. So you're claiming that. Let's see. You're basically claiming that the greatest act of love is to allow suffering. Therefore, a benevolent, all-powerful, all-wise God does not create a contradiction when evil exists. But that's a premise that assumes the conclusion is true.
Well, yeah, because if God has these attributes and they don't cause a logical contradiction, then
well, you're making a premise that assumes the conclusion is true. And dude, again and again, you are conceding to one of the Epicurean riddle propositions that God is not all good. You're admitting that he's committing acts of evil. So that's just a concession. So you're basically saying God is all-powerful, all-wise. Well, it could go either way, I suppose. You could either say God is all-powerful. Sorry. You could either say God is all-wise, benevolent, but he's doing the best he can to reduce suffering. Or you could say, like, I think, yeah, I think that's really what your argument sums up to. I think you're actually conceding to the all-powerful point, where he's not all-powerful. Because, like, yeah, because in your premise, you're essentially saying that, okay, well, God is, benevolent, he's all-loving, he's all-wise, so he's doing, like, the best he can to reduce suffering as much as possible, but he can't actually reduce suffering to the point where there is a perfect benevolent existence where nothing but good exists. So you're basically admitting he's not all powerful.
No, I'm not admitting that, and I still don't see the contradiction. But
Okay, so
I'm
okay, wait. Okay, wait. Would you say God is incapable of having a world where there is nothing but absolute perfect good?
Sorry, say that again. Sorry.
Would you say God is incapable of creating a world where there is nothing but absolute perfect good?
No,
So no suffering.
no.
Okay, so why the fuck doesn't he do it?
Because if the initially, in the story, us humans, Adam and Eve, they disobey God, and then obviously they get punished for it. But that is in a way an act of wisdom, through which we're now here at this point here. I'm not saying that.
Okay, wait. Let's go through this. So were Adam and Eve immortal in the Garden of Eden? Would they have lived forever?
I believe so. I believe so.
Okay, so if they could live eternally, indefinitely, forever, just through pure statistical probability, with an infinite amount of chances, there's no possible way they could ever exist indefinitely without disobeying God.
But it would still make it wrong. And the point of the story.
Okay, wait. So you're telling me God put humanity in a position where they had no other choice, just through sheer probability, but disobey him, and then he punished them for it.
No, he punished them for just disobeying. If you disobey God,
right, and he put them in a position where they would eventually disobey him.
That's not like it's the fault of the humans still for doing it. They shouldn't do it.
No. If you created humanity with the ability to disobey, and you gave them an infinite amount of time to do so, they will inevitably disobey. Correct?
Okay, so what are you saying that like that?
So what I'm pointing out is God deliberately put a situation where humanity would suffer. That's my point. Like, it wouldn't have even mattered if he gave them a choice or not. He could have just chosen to make humanity suffer. Like, what's the moral difference here? If it would have happened anyway, what's the moral difference between him giving us a choice to disobey, but giving us an infinite amount of time to choose to disobey, which would inevitably result in us disobeying and him punishing us, or him just like causing us to suffer, like without us even disobeying? What's the moral difference?
Because the moral difference, I'd say, is that ultimately, although there's this kind of promptness to do something wrong, it doesn't make it fine to do it, even if you were given this infinite amount of time. It doesn't suddenly mean that you're relinquished of your accountability because you were just prompted to do that. It prompted in that situation. When
it absolutely does. No, it absolutely does. So if you are given an infinite amount of time to do something wrong, then you are creating a situation where you are just punishing somebody for no fucking reason. God literally just created a situation where inevitably, we were going to do it anyway. So, like, how does it make any sense to punish us?
I mean, maybe I'm just
okay. Wait.
Yeah.
Okay, let me put this in a way that I can help you understand. Let's say rather than a Garden of Eden, God put us in a casino, and he told Adam and Eve, okay, play roulette. If you land on, I don't know, red 17, then, if you land on red 17, I'm going to punish you. But you have to play the game over and over and over again until you land on red 17. Eventually, you're going to land on red 17, and you're going to be punished. Does that make any sense?
It's still disanalogous, though, because what you're
No,
doing
no,
is
it's not. No, it's
because
not.
when you're playing casino, when I don't want to get into semantics and point intricates at your analogy there. But what you're saying is that when you play roulette, it's all in your control as to what you're doing. Just by playing, that's your control. But with the Garden of Eden, the only restriction on what you could do anything else, was just to not eat from the forbidden fruit. If I'm correct, I was like. So it gave them one order. Just follow that, and everything else is fine. To say, oh, it's the same thing as you playing roulette, and then you just happen by chance to get red 17. It's like
Okay, we can apply it. Like I don't see how that's disanalogous. It's still like a law of probability. Eventually, it's going to happen. So I don't see how that's disanalogous. We can apply this to something like poker. Okay, play poker over and over again. If you lose, then you get punished. Like, okay, well, poker is a game of skill. Okay, so with games of skill, okay, we could make it any fucking game. We could make it hockey. Okay, if you lose a match of hockey with someone, okay, then you get punished. Those are like that's skill. But eventually, if you play it again and again and again, over and over again, infinitely, eventually you're going to lose. Eventually, you're going to do something wrong. So you're telling me God deliberately put humans in a situation where he knew there would be this outcome. So you don't see anything wrong with punishing someone when you put them in a situation where you know for sure there is going to be this outcome.
No, I don't see the problem with that, because there's still the element of making a choice. I don't mean to make this like an ongoing thing, but like.
Okay, you can't say this is there's an element of making a choice, when just from sheer probability, it's just a numbers game, that thing is going to happen. If you have an infinite amount of time, billions upon billions of years, theoretically, infinity, it's going to happen. You can't just say, oh, it's a matter of choice. It's going to fucking happen.
So because it's going to happen, you feel that it's not right to punish them for something that's eventually going to happen.
Yes, I think it's wrong to punish somebody for something that is eventually going to happen, especially when you're essentially punishing humanity eternally for a finite crime. Eating an apple, and that's a contradiction too. Apparently, Adam and Eve ate the forbidden fruit that gave them the knowledge of good and evil. Well, if they didn't have the knowledge of good and evil in the first place, how the hell could you punish them for doing something that they wouldn't even know was wrong to begin with?
Because God told them to
okay, well, they wouldn't have understood good and evil to begin with. So how would they know right from wrong?
Because they were given orders they were told.
Okay, if they don't know right, if they don't know right from wrong, how would they know not to do it?
Well, I don't know. They were just given those orders, so they were told to follow it.
Okay, but if they don't know right from wrong, and they don't understand that disobeying orders is wrong, how could they be held responsible for that action?
Well, to be fair, I'm not sure about that one, so I would assume that it's an act of wisdom.
What do you mean an act of wisdom?
In the sense that, because again, I'm not too clued up on the story, but what I was thinking was that if it's an act of wisdom, that again, I can't really criticize what the plan is, because a lot of the times when bad things happen, I tend to, well, I think a lot of people tend to like question why these things happen, but then I always try and remember to myself that if God is the most wise, am I in a position to criticize what's happening around me? And that's why I don't think that I am. But I don't want to make this into like a circular thing where I bring back the principle of wisdom.
Okay, this is dude, this is beyond. This goes beyond, oh, well, God's all wise. He knows more than me. If you are incapable of knowing right from wrong because you have not eaten the forbidden fruit, so you're incapable of knowing that disobeying God is wrong, and then you disobey God, and then God punishes you for doing something that you didn't even know was wrong in the first place unless you ate the fruit that you weren't supposed to eat. That's a little bit of a fucking contradiction, wouldn't you say?
I'd say it's confusing. I would say it's confusing. I wouldn't say it's necessarily a contradiction, but I would say it's confusing.
How is that not like paradoxical?
Because it doesn't. For I understand the point of like if they weren't aware of what was right and wrong, but the principle it would still stand that if even in this day and age, if we were to disobey what God says, it almost acts as maybe an example, or like again through the act of wisdom, in that it's an example of like humans' disobedience, irrespective of whether it's wrong or right or whether they understand it. It's like whether you know it's right or wrong, you're still going to do it. Or if you don't know, then you still go against what God says.
Okay, dude. Let's say you are a child and you do not know right from wrong. Okay, so let's say you're a baby, and I tell you, hey, baby, don't poop your pants until I put you over the potty. Okay? You don't know, like, you don't know what the fuck, like, I'm saying. You're just told not to do it, but it's like you don't understand that it's wrong. You don't know the consequences of your actions. Should I punish a baby even though like I told them like not to do it, but they poop their pants anyway?
No, because it's out of their control whether they do it or not.
Okay, cool. So how is it not out of Adam and Eve's control when they're basically children and they don't know right from wrong?
No, because they're not just brought into this world as like babies. Like they have like they're just sorry, I'm just seeing your chat. I have your stream up. They were like when they were thrown into paradise and they were created. They weren't created as infants who were incapable of making their own decisions. As a baby, you can't make your own decisions. Whereas with Adam and Eve, they could make their own decisions, and they were tempted to make a decision.
They had the lack of moral agency just like children. So I don't see how you could make a meaningful differentiation.
Because they still have the act of making a choice. Whereas a baby, you literally don't have.
Well, what do you mean? The choice is arbitrary. Like the choice is arbitrary to them. If they don't understand, it's like if you had no idea of like nothing. If you knew nothing about politics and you were gonna decide to like vote between Biden and Trump, well, the choice means nothing to you. Sure, you can make a choice. You can vote Biden or Trump, but if you know absolutely nothing about either candidate, that choice is just arbitrary. I could say somebody who lacks moral agency, like Adam and Eve, who lack the knowledge of good and evil. Well, the choice is just arbitrary. So how the fuck can you like punish them for a decision like that? Like it's stupid. And even if we could agree, okay, they had some knowledge of good or evil and they knew what they were doing was wrong. Again, given infinity, eventually they're going to fucking do it.
I mean, it's I don't see I don't see any of us conceding anything, but I do appreciate the conversation. That I mean,
okay, wait. Okay, wait, dude.
Sure.
Given like, let's say I put you in a room and like there was everything you needed in that room, but I just told you do not touch the doorknob. If you were in there for an infinite amount of time, would you not agree you'd eventually touch the doorknob?
No, I agree with that. I'm just saying that it's still wrong.
Right. Okay, so then you agree that God put humans in a situation where he knew for sure they were going to do that.
I mean, perhaps, but I still.
How is it wrong for them? How is it wrong for them to do it when they have like eventually, if you're given infinity, you can't even use the free will argument because given infinity, you are going to do it. Like you can't even use the free will argument at that point. Like free will goes out the window because eventually, given infinity, you'll do everything that is like in your power to do.
I mean, if I was to concede that God put them into this position, I would still hold that the wisdom card would like perhaps
like dude, they didn't like they weren't even aware of the possible punishment they could receive.
Fair enough.
So you don't think that's fucking ridiculous?
No,
like, do you even take the story literally? Like, it's so fucking stupid. So God just created human beings knowing that he constructed a situation where they would, in fact, disobey him. So he just deliberately created a situation where he knows that he's going to make them suffer. So I don't even know why he'd construct the situation in the first place. He might as well have just made human beings suffer for no fucking reason. because that's what it would have led to anyway. You don't think that story is just absolutely fucking ridiculous?
No, I don't. I don't.
No, no. Okay,
No,
so if you were God,
yeah.
would you construct this contrived situation where you know somebody would do something, but you just construct the situation anyway?
I can't
Like
speak on
if God is all wise, like dude, if God is all wise, he'd know what would happen, correct?
well, yeah, obviously.
Okay, so then why the fuck would he do it in the first place?
Again, with being
Right,
wise,
there's no reason to, because if you know every single outcome that's ever going to happen, why the fuck would you do it? So you're telling me an all-powerful, benevolent God who's all-wise would deliberately create a world where suffering exists even though he knew that outcome would happen?
well, yes, because he has his wisdom that would triumph over whatever we can.
Well,
Whatever
if he
we
has
think of
wisdom,
God.
okay, well, if he has wisdom, then he'd know that if he did these actions, that suffering would exist. So you're saying he deliberately created suffering?
Yeah,
Yet being a benevolent being?
yeah.
How is that not a contradiction? So you're telling me an all good being deliberately created suffering in the world?
Wait, so do you think that
An
all
all
kinds of
good
suffering is bad?
an all good being deliberately created suffering in the world for no reason.
Well, you don't know the reason.
No,
if there's a
no,
reason for
I
it.
know the reason, and there is no reason. He's all wise, so he knows the result of every single action he would ever make. So if he knows the result of every single action he'd make, then the only explanation for him creating suffering is because that's basically Netflix to him. The Holocaust is like a Netflix show. So this is just something he does for his entertainment. A benevolent being would not deliberately create suffering. So you're flat out admitting that God created evil, God created suffering, knowing all of the actions that he did, creating the Garden of Eden, Adam and Eve. He knew suffering would result and evil would result from all of this, since you admit he is all powerful, all knowing, all wise. So he literally just did this for his own entertainment, and you're calling that a benevolent being. That's impossible.
No, I mean, because you're saying that he's doing this for his entertainment. You're saying that
There's no other possibility.
you're saying there's no reason for it and stuff like that. And I'm like,
Oh,
well,
okay, dude.
if you don't
Okay,
have the same
okay.
knowledge, then
Okay,
you're wrong.
dude, have you ever rewatched a TV show?
Oh yeah.
Okay, so why would you rewatch a TV show?
Oh, because I like it. I like
Yeah.
the Big Bang Theory.
Right. So basically, if God already knows the future, then he is just completing this. He's actually making the future with his actions because it's entertaining for him.
No,
Like,
because
he
you're
already
assuming
knows
that
what's
God
going to
needs
happen.
entertainment.
He
Well, that God
already
likes
knows.
entertainment.
There's no other explanation. If he already knows what's going to happen, why would he fulfill these fantasies in his head or this future knowledge he has? Entertainment.
I mean, no, I don't think it's entertainment. But I kind of have to go in a bit. But thank you for the
Okay, cool. Okay,
the
cool. So you don't
conversation.
think? Okay, wait. So
Sorry, go
when
on.
children get raped, you don't think God gets entertainment from that?
No.
Okay, so why else would he watch little girls get raped?
No, because
You don't think he gets
there's-
entertainment from that? I don't know. If you were God,
No.
do you think you'd enjoy watching children get raped?
Again, I mean, I can't speak from the perspective of God, but I'd still
Right.
say no.
Well, wait. Well, why don't you speak from your perspective? If you were all powerful, would you allow a child to get raped?
Well, if I had wisdom, then I don't know what I would do.
Oh, so if you were okay, so wait, you're saying that if you were really, really smart and wise, you'd just watch children get raped?
If it allowed them to get a better outcome, then yeah.
Okay, so you're telling me 8-year-old girls who get raped so severely that they actually die during the rape, that gives them a better outcome
If they
than
were to go to
not
heaven,
receiving
yeah.
the rape? Oh, okay. So, like God's doing them a favor by having them get raped to death.
Well, if they had an eternity in paradise, I'm sure all of us would rather have that option.
Okay, so
Yeah.
can you explain to me? Okay, so could you explain to me why God doesn't just give us paradise and not let anybody get raped to death? Like, why would he
No.
allow that to happen if the end result is going to be paradise? Like, is there any particular reason why 8-year-old
No, 'cause
girls have to get raped to
some of
death?
us go to paradise.
Is there any
some of us don't.
particular reason? Yeah, is there any particular reason why 8-year-old girls have to get raped to death for them to go to heaven? Like, why can't they just go to
No,
heaven?
it's not.
Why
that
can't
they
everybody
have
just go to heaven?
It's not
Oh, so God just does this for his entertainment, right? So God just does this for his entertainment?
No.
Right, right. So if you were God and you were really, really smart, would you just watch children get raped?
Sorry.
If you were God and you were all wise, would you personally just watch children get raped?
I mean, I don't know because I'm not all
Oh,
right.
you don't know.
but,
You don't know if you just watch. Would you look away or would you prefer to watch? Since you're like omniscient, you're omnipresent.
Obviously, well, but I can only speak from my perspective. I'd say I wouldn't want to see it. It's not a nice thing to see, obviously.
Okay, so but if you had the power to stop it, you just let it continue, right?
If it meant that they had an eternity in paradise, then why not?
Oh,
Like
okay,
the
yeah,
suffering
yeah.
here.
Just let the okay, yeah. The path to paradise is 8-year-old girls getting raped to death. All right,
No,
that makes sense, dude. Yeah, great religion you got, bro. Take care.
take it.
Wow, fucking retarded.